I asked my son to pick me up after I'd had a risky surgery, but he refused. So My name is Violet, and I am 67 years old, a retired nurse from Denver. I never thought my own son would abandon me when I needed him most. The doctors had just performed emergency gallbladder surgery on me with serious complications. The surgeon was very clear, absolutely no walking or driving for at least a week. So I texted James asking for a ride home. What my son texted back shattered my heart. My wife said we can't keep dropping everything for you every time. Just call an Uber. After everything I sacrificed raising him alone, this was how he repaid me. If you are watching this video, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Stick around to find out what happened when the hospital staff discovered I had no way to get home safely. I raised James entirely on my own since he was 3 years old. His father walked out on us without so much as a goodbye note, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. As a registered nurse working at Denver General Hospital, I took on double shifts whenever they were available. Sometimes I would work 16 hours straight, come home for 6 hours of sleep, then go right back. All so I could provide James with everything he needed. Those years were tough, but rewarding. I still remember how James would wait up for me on nights I worked late. He would be sitting at our small kitchen table with his homework spread out, determined to stay awake until I got home. "I wanted to tell you about my day, Mom," he would say with sleepy eyes. Those moments made all the exhaustion worth it. When James showed academic promise in high school, I picked up weekend shifts to save for his college fund. My colleagues thought I was crazy to work so much, but seeing him thrive made it all worthwhile. He graduated valedictorian of his class and earned a partial scholarship to Colorado State University. The remaining tuition I covered by refinancing our small house and dipping into what little savings I had managed to put away. Throughout college, James would call me at least 3 times a week. We remained close, even though he lived on campus. I attended every parent weekend event and beamed with pride when he graduated with honors in business administration. He landed a good job at a marketing firm in Denver, and for several years after college, we had Sunday dinner together without fail. He would bring his laundry sometimes, and I never minded. Those moments together were precious to me. Everything changed when James met Amanda. She was beautiful and ambitious, working as a real estate agent for luxury properties in Cherry Creek. They met at a networking event, and James was immediately smitten. I was happy for him when he introduced us 6 months into their relationship. Amanda was polite but distant during that first dinner at my home. She barely touched the pot roast I had spent hours preparing, mentioning something about being on a special diet. "Your home is so cozy," she had commented, looking around my modest living room with what I could only describe as barely concealed disdain. I had spent the entire week cleaning and making everything perfect for meeting the woman my son was clearly falling for. Her dismissive tone hurt, but I smiled through it for James' sake. When they announced their engagement after dating for just 8 months, I was surprised but supportive. James seemed truly happy, and that's all I ever wanted for him. I offered to help with wedding planning, but Amanda politely declined, saying her mother had already hired a professional wedding planner. The ceremony was lavish, held at one of the most expensive venues in Denver. I felt out of place among Amanda's wealthy family and friends, but I put on my best dress and brightest smile for my son's special day. After the wedding, our Sunday dinners became monthly visits, then occasional get-togethers. James always had an excuse: work was busy. Amanda had planned something they were saving for a house. I understood that newlyweds needed their space, so I never complained. I simply treasured the moments we did have together. I noticed James rarely came alone anymore. Amanda was always with him, controlling the conversation and checking her watch frequently. If I called James with a question, or just to chat, he would often say, "Can I call you back later, Mom? We're in the middle of something." That call back would sometimes come days later, or not at all. The final straw was last Christmas, when James called 2 hours before our planned dinner to say they wouldn't be coming. Amanda's parents surprised us with tickets to Aspen for the weekend, he explained, not quite meeting my eyes during our video call. "You understand, right, Mom?" I did understand more than he realized. I understood that I was being gradually pushed out of my son's life. But I smiled and wished them a wonderful trip, then ate my carefully prepared Christmas dinner alone with leftovers that lasted me well into the new year. Despite these disappointments, I tried to maintain our connection. I sent thoughtful birthday and anniversary gifts, shared articles I thought would interest him, and kept my calls brief so as not to bother them. I even took a cooking class to learn how to make the gluten-free, dairy-free desserts that Amanda preferred. Still, the invitations to their new home in the suburbs were few and far between. In the months before my surgery, I noticed James canceling our plans more frequently. "Sorry, Mom, Amanda isn't feeling well," or "something came up at work at the last minute." I worried about the growing distance between us, but told myself not to be a clingy mother. He was a grown man with his own life now. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache in my heart each time he pulled further away. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning while I was watering my plants. A sudden sharp pain in my abdomen made me double over, spilling water all over my hardwood floors. I dismissed it as indigestion, took some antacids, and went about my day. By evening, the pain had subsided to a dull ache, and I convinced myself it was nothing serious. 2 days later, the pain returned with a vengeance while I was grocery shopping. Standing in the produce section selecting the perfect avocados, I was struck with a pain so intense that I dropped my basket. A kind elderly gentleman helped me to a bench while the store manager called an ambulance despite my weak protests that I could drive myself home. "Ma'am, you're pale as a ghost and can barely stand," the manager said firmly. "Please let the professionals check you out." In the emergency room, the doctors moved quickly. Blood tests showed elevated white blood cell counts and liver enzymes. The ultrasound technician frowned at her screen, calling in the attending physician for a second look. "Mrs. Harper, you're having an acute gallbladder attack," the doctor explained. "But there's something else concerning us. The gallbladder appears to be severely inflamed and may have perforated. We're going to need to take you into surgery immediately." My nursing background kicked in, and I understood the seriousness of the situation. A perforated gallbladder could lead to peritonitis, a potentially life-threatening infection of the abdominal cavity. As they prepped me for surgery, I realized I hadn't told anyone I was in the hospital. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to call James. "James, honey, I'm at Denver Memorial. They found gallstones and possible perforation. I am going into surgery soon." I tried to keep my voice steady, not wanting to alarm him. "Surgery today. Are you okay?" He sounded genuinely concerned, which warmed my heart despite the circumstances. "The doctors say they caught it fairly early, but they need to operate right away. Would you be able to come to the hospital? I know it's short notice, but—" "Of course, Mom. I'll be there as soon as I can get away from the office, probably within the hour. Hang tight, okay?" Those words comforted me as the nurses wheeled me to the preoperative area. I kept looking toward the door, expecting to see James rush in at any moment. The anesthesiologist explained the procedure, had me sign consent forms, and began preparing the medications that would soon put me under. "Is your family here yet?" the nurse asked kindly as she checked my vital signs one last time. "My son is on his way," I replied, glancing again at the clock. 2 hours had passed since our call. "We can wait a few more minutes if you'd like," she offered, but the surgeon appeared, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, but we can't delay any longer. The CT scan shows signs of beginning peritonitis. We need to get in there now." As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I asked the nurse to call James if he arrived to let him know I'd gone into surgery. She promised she would, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. My last thought before the anesthesia took effect was of James' face, hoping he would be there when I woke up. But he wasn't. I emerged from anesthesia alone, groggy and disoriented, in the recovery room. The nurse explained that the surgery had been more complicated than anticipated. The gallbladder had indeed perforated, spilling infected bile into my abdomen. The surgeon had to perform extensive cleaning of the abdominal cavity and place drains to help remove any remaining infection. "Did my son come?" I asked, my mouth dry from the breathing tube that had been removed. The nurse checked my chart and shook her head. No visitors have been recorded. Would you like me to try calling him? I nodded, providing James' number again. She stepped away with my phone returning a few minutes later with a sympathetic expression. It went to voicemail. I left a message letting him know you're out of surgery and in recovery. Later that evening, after being moved to a private room, I tried calling James myself. Again, straight to voicemail. I left a brief message trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. James, it's Mom. Surgery is over. It was a bit more complicated than they thought, but I'm doing okay. Just wanted to let you know. The next morning, Dr. Richardson, my surgeon, came to check on me. He explained the severity of what they had found and outlined what would be a difficult recovery process. Mrs. Harper, this wasn't a simple gallbladder removal. The infection had spread quite extensively. We're going to keep you here for at least 3 more days on IV antibiotics. After discharge, you'll need to be extremely careful. No driving for at least 2 weeks, no lifting anything heavier than a gallon of milk, and very limited walking for the first week. You have drains that will need to be emptied and measured several times a day. He looked at me with concern. Do you have someone who can help you at home? These post-operative instructions are critical to follow, especially given your age and the extent of the infection. Complications could land you right back in the hospital, or worse. My son will help me, I said automatically, though a knot formed in my stomach. James still hadn't called or visited. Dr. Richardson nodded, satisfied with my answer. Excellent. We'll have a nurse go over all the home care instructions with both of you before discharge. The drain management in particular requires careful attention to prevent further infection. After he left, I tried calling James again. This time, to my relief, he answered. Mom, sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. Things got crazy at work, and then Amanda needed me to look at houses with her. How are you feeling? I swallowed my disappointment. The surgery was more serious than they expected, James. I have drains and a pretty significant incision. The doctor says I'll need help when I go home. When will that be? He asked, and I thought I detected hesitation in his voice. Probably Friday morning if all goes well with the antibiotics. Would you be able to pick me up and help me get settled at home? The doctor says I can't drive and should barely be walking for the first week. Friday morning. There was definite reluctance now. Let me check with Amanda. We're supposed to be looking at more properties, but maybe we can reschedule. I'll get back to you, okay? He never did get back to me. Each day in the hospital I called and left messages that went unanswered. By Thursday afternoon, with discharge planned for the following morning, I still hadn't heard from James. The discharge coordinator came to my room with paperwork and a concerned expression. Mrs. Harper, we need to confirm your transportation home tomorrow. Will your son be picking you up? Yes, I said with more confidence than I felt. He'll be here. I would try him one more time. Friday morning arrived and the discharge process began early. A nurse came in to remove my IV and help me get dressed in the comfortable clothes I had requested be brought from home by the hospital volunteer service. The physical therapist visited to demonstrate how to get in and out of bed safely and how to walk with minimal strain on my abdominal muscles. The pharmacist reviewed my prescriptions for antibiotics and pain management. All the while I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from James. Nothing. At 10 o'clock, the discharge coordinator returned with my final paperwork. Mrs. Harper, your transportation should be here by now. Have you heard from your son? He must be running late, I said, forcing a smile. Traffic can be terrible this time of day. Would it be possible for me to wait in the discharge lounge? Of course, she replied. Let me check on a wheelchair for you. While she was gone, I decided to text James rather than call. Maybe he was in a meeting and could respond to a text more easily. James, I'm being discharged now. Doctor said I can't walk yet. Can you pick me up when you have time today? I watched the screen, saw the message marked as delivered, then read. The 3 dots appeared indicating he was typing a response. My heart lifted with relief. Then his reply appeared. My wife said we can't keep dropping everything for you every time. Just call an Uber. I stared at the message in disbelief, reading it over and over. Surely this couldn't be my James, my son, who I'd cradled through ear infections and nightmares, who I'd worked double shifts to put through college, who I'd supported through every crisis and triumph of his life. The son who had promised just days ago to check his schedule and get back to me. With trembling fingers, I typed back, "James, I just had major surgery. The doctor says I shouldn't be alone. I need help with the surgical drains and getting medications." His response came quickly. "Mom, we're really busy right now with Amanda's career taking off. Maybe one of your friends from the hospital can help. I can stop by next weekend, maybe." Tears filled my eyes, blurring the screen. I had no close friends at the hospital anymore, not since retiring 3 years ago. Most of my former colleagues had moved away, or were busy with their own families. I had always put James first, which meant my social circle had shrunk over the years. The few friends I did have were either traveling or dealing with health issues of their own. I put the phone down on the bed, too devastated to respond. All those years of sacrifice, the missed sleep, the second jobs, the refinanced house to pay for his education. The birthdays I had celebrated with him, the holidays, the unwavering support through every phase of his life. How could he dismiss me so coldly now? The discharge coordinator returned with a wheelchair. She must have noticed my tears because her professional demeanor softened immediately. "Mrs. Harper, is everything all right? Is your son on his way?" I couldn't bring myself to explain the full truth. The shame of being abandoned by my only child was too great. "He can't make it," I managed to say. "I need to arrange another way home." "I see," she said, clearly concerned. "Do you have anyone else who could help you? The doctor was very clear about your need for assistance, especially in the first few days." "I can call a taxi," I suggested weakly, though I knew it wasn't just transportation I needed. I needed someone to help me get settled at home, to make sure I could manage the drains properly, to help me to the bathroom safely to pick up my prescriptions. "Mrs. Harper," she said gently, sitting in the chair beside my bed, "a taxi isn't appropriate given your condition. You need more support than that. Would you like me to contact our social services department? They might be able to arrange home health care." The humiliation was overwhelming. In all my 67 years, I had never been in this position, dependent alone and abandoned by the person I trusted most. Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks as I nodded, unable to speak. The discharge coordinator stepped out to make the call, leaving me alone with my phone and the devastating text message still open on the screen. In a moment of desperation and heartbreak, I tried calling James directly. It went straight to voicemail. He had deliberately sent me to voicemail. I sat in the wheelchair, waiting for the discharge coordinator to return, replaying all the times I had dropped everything for James. The time I left in the middle of my shift when he broke his arm in 6th grade. The night I drove 2 hours through a snowstorm to bring him cold medicine during his freshman year of college. The week I took off work to help him move into his first apartment. The countless times I had rearranged my life to accommodate his needs. Now, when I needed him for perhaps the first time ever, he couldn't be bothered to drop everything for me. As minutes turned to an hour, I became increasingly aware of the hospital staff glancing my way with pitying looks. The discharge lounge was filling up with other patients whose family members arrived, promptly helping them into cars with gentle care, taking custody of discharge instructions and medication lists. Each reunion I witnessed was another twist of the knife in my heart. I had been sitting in the discharge lounge for nearly 2 hours when a nurse named Angela approached me. She wasn't my assigned nurse, but I recognized her from the surgical floor. "Mrs. Harper, are you still waiting for your ride?" she asked. Her brown eyes filled with concern. "Yes," I replied, embarrassed. "There seems to be a mix-up with my son." Angela glanced at the clock on the wall, then back at me. "You've been waiting quite a while. Is there someone else we could call for you?" The kindness in her voice broke down my remaining defenses. To my mortification, I began to cry again, the sobs causing painful pulling at my abdominal incision. Angela immediately sat beside me and handed me a tissue. "I'm so sorry," I managed between sobs. "I don't have anyone else to call." Angela waited patiently for me to regain my composure. When I had calmed somewhat, she gently asked, "Would you mind if I asked what's going on? Maybe I can help." Perhaps it was the pain medication lowering my inhibitions, or simply the overwhelming need to unburden myself to someone, but I found myself showing Angela the text exchange with James. Her expression shifted from concern to indignation as she read. Mrs. Harper, this is completely unacceptable. You just had major surgery. You cannot take an Uber home alone. I don't know what else to do, I admitted. The discharge coordinator is trying to arrange home health care, but even if that works out, I still need to get home somehow. Angela was quiet for a moment, appearing to contemplate something. My brother Frank works for a medical transport service. He's off duty today, but I know he'd be willing to help. Would you be comfortable if I called him? I hesitated, reluctant to impose on strangers when my own son had refused to help. I couldn't ask that of him on his day off. You aren't asking, I'm offering, Angela insisted. Frank is a good man and he'd want to help. Please let me call him. Out of options and increasingly anxious about being a burden on the hospital, I nodded my agreement. Angela stepped away to make the call, returning a few minutes later with a smile. Frank will be here in about 30 minutes. He's coming from across town. How much will this cost? I asked, suddenly worried about the expense. My retirement income was modest, and the hospital bills would already stretch my budget. Angela waved away my concern. Nothing. Frank insists. He says to consider it a professional courtesy from one healthcare worker to another. True to his word, Frank arrived exactly 30 minutes later. He was a tall man in his 40s, with the same kind eyes as his sister. He approached with a gentle smile and introduced himself. Mrs. Harper, I'm Frank, Angela's brother. I understand you need a ride home today. I can't thank you enough for coming, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You really didn't have to do this on your day off. Frank knelt beside my wheelchair to meet me at eye level. It's my pleasure. Anyone who worked as a nurse for over 30 years deserves some extra care themselves. Angela's told me a bit about your situation, and I've brought my work van. It's fully equipped to transport patients safely. The discharge coordinator returned with my final paperwork and seemed relieved to find that transportation had been arranged. She provided Frank with copies of my discharge instructions and medication list after confirming with me that it was okay to share this information. Frank was extraordinarily careful, helping me into his van, making sure I was comfortable for the journey. As we drove to my apartment, he maintained a gentle conversation, distracting me from both my physical discomfort and emotional pain. My mother was a nurse too, he shared. Toughest job in the world if you ask me. She always put everyone else first. Sounds like you did the same. When we arrived at my apartment building, Frank didn't just drop me off. He helped me inside, made sure I could get to the bathroom safely, and even arranged my medications on the kitchen counter by the times I needed to take them. Do you have food in the house? He asked, glancing at my nearly empty refrigerator. Not much, I admitted. I wasn't expecting to be hospitalized. Frank nodded decisively. Tell you what, I'm going to run to the store and pick up some essentials for you. Nothing fancy, just some things that will be easy for you to prepare. Before I could protest, he held up a hand. And before you argue, remember that this is what communities are supposed to do. We help each other. You spent your career helping others now, it's your turn to receive a little help. Frank returned an hour later with bags of groceries, simple meals that could be easily reheated, fresh fruit, and other necessities. He put everything away, made sure I had a meal ready for dinner, and programmed his phone number into my cell phone. Call me if you need anything, he insisted. Day or night, I mean it. And Angela will check in with you tomorrow. As Frank prepared to leave, I found myself overwhelmed by the kindness of these virtual strangers, compared to the coldness of my own son. I don't know how I'll ever repay you, I said, tears threatening again. Frank smiled warmly. Just get better. That's all the repayment any of us need. That first night alone in my apartment was difficult, both physically and emotionally. The pain medication made me drowsy, but didn't entirely eliminate the discomfort. Each time I had to get up to use the bathroom was a slow, careful process. Emptying the surgical drains as instructed was challenging to do on my own. But worse than the physical pain was the emotional devastation. As I lay in bed, I couldn't stop my thoughts from returning to James and his cruel rejection. The contrast between his abandonment and the kindness of Angela and Frank made his betrayal even more painful. How had I raised a son who could so easily dismiss his mother in her time of need? And what had I done to deserve such treatment? The following days of my recovery were more difficult than I could have imagined. Despite Frank's grocery delivery, I quickly discovered how challenging it was to prepare even the simplest meals while managing my pain and limited mobility. The doctor had emphasized minimal walking, but living alone meant I had no choice but to move around my apartment for basic necessities. On the third day after my discharge, I ran into a serious problem. My pain medication was running low, and the pharmacy couldn't deliver until the next day. I needed to take my antibiotics with food, but I had nothing prepared. Desperate and increasingly uncomfortable, I attempted to make a simple sandwich. As I reached for a plate in the upper cabinet, a sharp pain tore through my abdomen. I gasped, lost my balance, and fell against the kitchen counter before sliding to the floor. The impact dislodged one of my surgical drains, and I felt immediate wetness on my shirt as it began leaking. I called out for help instinctively, though I knew no one could hear me. For nearly 20 minutes, I lay on the cold kitchen floor, trying to gather the strength to reach my phone on the counter above me. The pain was excruciating, and I worried that I had torn internal stitches. Finally, I heard a knock at my door. "Mrs. Harper, it's Mrs. Rodriguez from next door. I heard a loud noise. Are you all right?" "Help." I called, my voice weaker than I expected. "Please, the door is unlocked." Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman I'd exchanged pleasantries with in the hallway, but never really known, entered cautiously. When she saw me on the floor, she gasped and rushed to my side. "Oh, dear Lord. What happened? Should I call an ambulance?" "Yes, please," I whispered, clutching my abdomen where the drain had partially dislodged. Within minutes, the apartment was filled with paramedics. They carefully assessed my condition, noted the displaced drain, and the growing stain of fluid on my clothing. "Mrs. Harper, we're going to need to take you back to the hospital," one of them explained. "This drain needs to be checked by a doctor, and we need to make sure you haven't pulled any internal stitches." As they prepared me for transport, Mrs. Rodriguez picked up my phone. "Is there someone I should call for you, family?" I thought of James, wondered if an emergency would finally prompt him to show up, then dismissed the thought. "There's a number in my contacts. Frank, could you call him, please?" Back at the hospital, the news wasn't good. The fall had indeed compromised some of my internal stitches, and worse, the dislodged drain had allowed bacteria to enter the wound. I had developed an infection that was potentially more serious than my initial condition. "Mrs. Harper, we're going to need to readmit you," Dr. Richardson explained with a frown. "This infection is concerning, especially given the extensive nature of your original surgery. We're going to start you on stronger IV antibiotics immediately." "How long will I need to stay?" I asked, despair washing over me. "At least 4 to 5 days, possibly longer depending on how you respond to treatment. And I have to ask, what happened? You were given very specific instructions about limited movement." I explained about living alone and trying to manage on my own. Dr. Richardson looked troubled. "I was under the impression your son would be helping you. That's what you said before discharge." "There was a change of plans," I said quietly, unable to admit the truth. Dr. Richardson wasn't satisfied with my vague answer. "Mrs. Harper, as your physician, I need to understand your home situation. This readmission is serious. The infection could lead to sepsis if not properly treated, and your aftercare will be even more crucial now." Reluctantly, I explained about James' refusal to help and my lack of support system. Dr. Richardson listened with growing concern. "In that case, I'm going to have our social worker visit you today. We need to make sure proper supports are in place before you leave the hospital again. Attempting to recover from this type of surgery alone is not just difficult, it's dangerous, as you've unfortunately discovered." Later that afternoon, a hospital social worker named Rachel came to my room. She was a compassionate young woman who listened carefully as I explained my situation. "Mrs. Harper, I'm concerned that you were discharged without adequate support in place. That shouldn't have happened. Do you have any friends or extended family who might be able to help you?" I shook my head. "Most of my friends are either dealing with their own health issues or have moved away to be near their children. My closest relative besides my son is a cousin in Florida, whom I haven't seen in years." Rachel made notes in her file. "What about your son?" I understand there were issues before, but given the seriousness of your condition, now could we try contacting him again? I don't think he'd come, I said, the admission painful to voice aloud. With your permission, I'd like to try. Sometimes people don't fully understand the gravity of a situation until it's spelled out by a professional. I hesitated, then gave her James' contact information. The thought of a stranger calling to essentially beg my son to care for me was humiliating, but my health was at stake. While I waited for news about James, Frank continued to visit me in the hospital. He brought magazines, crossword puzzles, and even homemade soup that his wife had prepared. Hospital food will keep you alive, but it won't lift your spirits, he joked. Angela stopped by frequently as well sometimes, just for a few minutes between her shifts. Their consistent kindness was a balm to my wounded heart, showing me that there was still goodness in the world, even when it didn't come from where I most expected it. On my third day of readmission, Rachel returned with an update. Mrs. Harper, I spoke with your son yesterday. I explained the seriousness of your condition and the necessity of having support during your recovery. What did he say? I asked, both hoping for and dreading the answer. He said he would come visit today. He seemed concerned when I explained what had happened. True to his word for once, James did arrive that afternoon. But he wasn't alone. Amanda came with him, her face set in a tight expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. James entered my hospital room first, his face a mask of discomfort and guilt. Amanda followed, maintaining a careful distance from my bed, as if my condition might somehow be contagious. The atmosphere was immediately tense. Mom, James began awkwardly. The social worker called. She said you fell. Yes, I replied simply, unsure how much to share. Part of me wanted to protect him from the consequences of his actions, a mother's instinct to shield her child from pain. Another part wanted him to fully understand what his abandonment had cost me. The doctors say you have a serious infection now, he continued, glancing at the IV antibiotics dripping into my arm. The drain came loose when I fell. Bacteria entered the wound. Amanda cleared her throat. You should have hired a home health aide, Violet. James and I both work full-time. We can't just drop everything whenever you have a problem. I noticed James flinch at her words, so similar to the text message he'd sent me. Amanda, he murmured, maybe not now. No, let's be honest, she insisted, her voice taking on an edge. Your mother has always expected you to come running whenever she calls. It's not fair to you, and it's definitely not fair to me. I watched my son carefully, seeing the conflict on his face. He was torn between his wife and his mother, and it was clear which side had been winning. Is that how you feel, James? I asked quietly. That I've been unfair to you? He wouldn't meet my eyes. You do call a lot, Mom. Sometimes for things you could handle yourself. The accusation stung. I tried to remember the last time I'd asked James for help before the surgery. It had been months, perhaps even a year. I'd been so careful not to be a burden, to respect his new life with Amanda. When was the last time I asked you for help, James? I challenged gently. Before this surgery. He shifted uncomfortably. I don't know exactly, but Amanda is right that you've been calling more lately. I've called to check on you, I clarified. To try to maintain our relationship, not to ask for help. Amanda rolled her eyes. Those hour-long calls while James is trying to relax after work are intrusive. We have our own lives, Violet. I noticed she never called me Mrs. Harper or even Mom, despite being my daughter-in-law for 5 years. Always Violet, as if to emphasize we were not truly family. The conversation was interrupted when a nurse came in to check my vital signs and adjust my medication. She smiled politely at James and Amanda before focusing on her tasks. When she left the room, fell into uncomfortable silence again. Finally, James spoke. The social worker said you need someone to help you when you're discharged again. She was pretty insistent about it. Yes, I acknowledged. The doctor won't release me unless there's a care plan in place. They're arranging for home health services, but I'll still need some family support. Amanda's posture stiffened. We're in the middle of my biggest sales quarter, James. I have 3 luxury listings that could make or break my chance at partner. I watched my son's face, seeing the internal struggle. He'd always been sensitive and eager to please, sometimes to his detriment. I wondered when he had become so afraid of disappointing his wife that he'd risk his mother's health. Perhaps, I suggested carefully, you could visit for an hour after work a few days a week, just to check in and help with things the home health aide won't cover. Before James could respond, Amanda cut in. We barely have time for our own dinner most nights, and we're trying to save for a down payment on that house in Cherry Hills. We can't afford to waste gas driving across town every day. Amanda, James said, his voice showing a rare hint of backbone. It wouldn't be every day, and it's my mom. Amanda's face flushed with anger. So I'm supposed to handle everything at home while you play nurse? Who's going to cook dinner? Who's going to deal with the realtor about our offer? Who's going to— Enough, said a firm voice from the doorway. It was Rachel, the social worker, who had apparently been standing there for some time. Mr. Harper? Mrs. Harper, I'd like to speak with you both in private, please. I expected Amanda to correct Rachel about her name. She had kept her maiden name Davis after marriage, but she remained silent, perhaps recognizing the authority in Rachel's tone. James looked relieved at the interruption. We'll be right back, Mom. They followed Rachel out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the steady beeping of the heart monitor. I closed my eyes, exhausted by the confrontation. This wasn't how I'd raised my son to behave. The James I knew would never have allowed anyone, even someone he loved, to speak to his mother with such disrespect. About 20 minutes later, James returned alone. His face was troubled, but determined. He sat in the chair beside my bed and took my hand, the first real contact between us since he'd arrived. Mom, I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I had no idea things had gotten this bad with your health. I should have been there for you. Where's Amanda? I asked, noticing her absence. She went home. We had a disagreement. He sighed heavily. The social worker made it very clear how serious your condition is and how your fall was a direct result of not having proper support at home. James, I don't want to come between you and your wife, I said, meaning it despite everything. I never wanted to be the cause of problems in my son's marriage. This isn't about that, he insisted, though his expression suggested otherwise. This is about me failing you when you needed me. All those years you were there for me, and the one time you really needed my help, I sent you a text telling you to call an Uber. His eyes filled with tears. I'm so ashamed, Mom. It was the honesty I had been waiting for. What happened to us, James? We used to be so close. He was quiet for a long moment. Amanda thinks I'm too attached to you, he finally admitted. She says I need to cut the apron strings if our marriage is going to work. And you believed her. I wanted our marriage to succeed. I thought maybe she was right, that I was too dependent on you emotionally. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. She controls our finances, did you know that? All my salary goes into accounts she manages. She gives me an allowance. I was shocked. James, that's not normal in a marriage. I know that now, he said quietly. The social worker helped me see some things more clearly. She asked me how I'd feel if our situations were reversed, if Amanda had treated her mother the way we've been treating you. And I'd be horrified, he admitted. I'd think she was being cruel, but somehow when it was happening with you, I couldn't see it clearly. A nurse interrupted us to administer my evening medications. When she left, James continued, I've made a decision, Mom. I'm going to help you through this recovery no matter what Amanda says. It's the right thing to do, and I should have stepped up from the beginning. What about Amanda? I asked cautiously. His expression hardened slightly. She'll have to understand. And if she doesn't, well, that will tell me something important about our marriage, won't it? I wasn't entirely convinced of his resolve. I'd seen him waver under Amanda's influence too many times, but I was touched by his intention. Thank you, James. Before he left that evening, he promised to return the following day to speak with my doctors about the care I would need upon discharge. As I watched him go, I felt a cautious hope. Perhaps this crisis would be the wake-up call he needed. But later that night, as I was drifting off to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text message. Mom, Amanda is really upset. She says if I spend time helping you, it proves I don't prioritize our marriage. I don't know what to do. And just like that, my cautious hope deflated. Even now, with his mother hospitalized with a serious infection resulting directly from his neglect, James couldn't stand firm against his wife's manipulation. I didn't respond to the text. What could I say that would make a difference if he couldn't see the situation clearly for himself? The next morning, I was surprised when both Rachel and a hospital administrator came to my room. They informed me that the hospital had expedited approval for comprehensive home health care services through my insurance, plus additional community supports. We've arranged for a home health nurse to visit daily for the first 2 weeks, Rachel explained. They'll help with your medical needs, including the drains and wound care. We've also arranged for a home health aide to assist with personal care and light housekeeping 3 times a week. That sounds expensive, I worried. The administrator smiled reassuringly. Your insurance will cover most of it, and we've found a community program that will cover the remainder. You worked as a nurse in this community for over 30 years, Mrs. Harper. Consider this the community giving back. I was touched by their efforts, but still concerned about the gaps in care. What about the times when neither the nurse nor the aide is there? That's where your son would normally come in, Rachel acknowledged. But given the complications, in that regard, we've reached out to the Senior Companion Program. They can provide a volunteer to check in on you during critical times. I felt simultaneously grateful for the support and humiliated that such extraordinary measures were necessary because my own son couldn't be counted on. But I pushed aside my pride. What mattered was recovering safely. As Rachel and the administrator were leaving, they passed Frank in the doorway. He was carrying a small plant and wearing a broad smile. Good news, he announced. My sister Angela and I have worked out a schedule. Between the two of us, we can check on you every evening after the home health folks leave. No arguments, he added, seeing me about to protest. We've already decided. My physical recovery progressed steadily with the proper medical care I received in the hospital. After 5 days of intensive IV antibiotics, the infection began to clear. Dr. Richardson was pleased with my improvement, but remained firm about the aftercare requirements. Mrs. Harper, I cannot stress enough how important it is that you follow the discharge plan to the letter this time, he emphasized during his morning rounds. No reaching, no lifting, minimal walking for at least 2 more weeks. The home health nurse will manage your drains and wound care, but you need to promise me you'll rest. I promise, I assured him, humbled by my previous experience. I've learned my lesson about trying to do too much. On the day before my scheduled discharge, James finally reappeared. He came alone, looking tired and stressed with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. Mom, he began hesitantly, I need to talk to you about what's going to happen when you go home. I nodded, preparing myself for what I suspected was coming. He faltered, then steadied himself. I want to help you. I really do. But Amanda has made it clear that if I spend time taking care of you, she'll see it as choosing you over her. I see, I said quietly, working to keep the disappointment from my voice. She doesn't understand why you need so much help. He continued, not meeting my eyes. She keeps saying her mother never needed this kind of attention after her knee surgery. I couldn't help but point out the obvious. James' knee surgery is very different from what I've experienced. I had a perforated gallbladder that caused peritonitis, followed by a post-surgical infection. The situations aren't comparable. I know that, he said quickly. I tried to explain it to her, but she just accuses me of making excuses to spend time with you instead of her. The painful truth was becoming increasingly clear. My son, now a grown man in his 30s, was emotionally captive to a woman who saw his mother as competition rather than family. James, I said gently, I need to ask you something important, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Does Amanda separate you from other people you care about, or is it just me? He looked startled by the question. What do you mean? Do you still see your old friends, the ones you had before you met her? Do you still play basketball with Mike and Tom on weekends? Do you still meet Carl for lunch? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I continued softly. Sweetheart, what you're describing isn't a healthy relationship. People who love you don't isolate you from others who love you. She's not isolating me, he protested, but without conviction. She just wants us to build our life together, to focus on our future. A future where you have no meaningful connections outside of her. He had no answer for that. James, I'm not going to force you to choose between Amanda and me. The social worker has helped arrange extensive home health support for me. I'll be okay. Really? The relief in his voice was painful to hear. Yes, but I want you to think about what kind of marriage you have if you're afraid to help your mother after surgery because of how your wife will react. That's not normal, and it's not healthy. James looked uncomfortable but nodded slightly. I'll try to stop by when I can, he offered weakly. Maybe when Amanda has evening showings I could visit for a little while. That would be nice, I said, though I had little expectation that it would actually happen. As predicted, James did not show up for my discharge the following day. Instead, Frank arrived with his van ready to transport me home. The hospital staff had provided thorough training to the home health nurse who would be overseeing my care, and all the arrangements had been confirmed. My apartment had been prepared for my return. The home health agency had delivered a hospital bed for the living room, so I wouldn't need to navigate stairs to my bedroom. A shower chair had been installed in my bathroom along with grab bars. Meals had been arranged through a community service for seniors. As Frank helped me settle into my apartment, I was struck by the contrast between the professional but impersonal medical equipment surrounding me and the small, thoughtful touches Frank and Angela had added: fresh flowers on the coffee table, my favorite tea stocked in the cupboard, a basket of magazines and puzzle books within easy reach of the bed. Angela's coming by after her shift, Frank told me as he adjusted my pillows. She's bringing dinner for both of you. I'll be back tomorrow evening to check on you. Frank, I said, catching his hand, I don't know how I'll ever repay you and Angela for your kindness. He smiled that same warm smile that had comforted me from our first meeting. There's nothing to repay. This is what decent people do for each other. As promised, the home health nurse arrived that afternoon to check my vital signs and manage my surgical drains. She was efficient and kind, explaining everything she was doing and making sure I understood the signs of complications to watch for. That evening, Angela arrived with homemade soup and fresh bread. As we ate together in my living room, she asked cautiously, "Have you heard from your son?" "No," I admitted. "I don't expect to hear from him much during my recovery." Angela looked troubled. "I don't understand how any child could abandon their parent this way, especially after everything you've done for him." I sighed, the familiar ache of disappointment heavy in my chest. I've been thinking about it a lot, trying to understand. I think James is in an emotionally controlling relationship. Amanda has systematically isolated him from everyone who cares about him, including me. That's terrible, Angela said. But he's a grown man. Why does he allow it? It probably happened so gradually he didn't notice until it was too late. And now he's financially entangled with her as well. She controls all their money, gives him an allowance. Angela shook her head in disbelief. Have you tried talking to him about it? I've tried, but he's not ready to hear it. He has to come to that realization on his own. As the days passed, my physical recovery continued steadily with the excellent care I received. The home health nurse visited daily, the aide came 3 times a week to help with bathing and housekeeping, and Frank and Angela checked in every evening without fail. The volunteers from the Senior Companion Program filled the remaining gaps, ensuring I was never without support for too long. But despite the comprehensive care, there was a hole in my heart that no medical professional or kind-hearted volunteer could fill. My son's absence was a constant ache, a reminder of how drastically our relationship had changed. As weeks passed and my strength gradually returned, I had plenty of time to reflect on my relationship with James and the painful reality I now faced. The surgical drains were eventually removed. My incision healed cleanly, and I began short walks around my apartment building to rebuild my strength. Throughout this recovery period, James remained conspicuously absent. He texted occasionally with brief messages, "Hope you're feeling better," or "Let me know if you need anything." But he never visited, never called, and never responded meaningfully when I suggested specific times he might stop by. Each hollow text was another small wound to my heart. Then, nearly 3 weeks after my discharge, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find James standing there alone, looking uncomfortable but determined. "James," I said, surprised. "Come in." He entered hesitantly, taking in the medical equipment that still occupied my living room. "You look better," he offered awkwardly. "I'm getting there," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "The home health nurse says I'm making good progress." He nodded, perching on the edge of the couch, as if prepared for a quick escape. "That's good. I've been worried." I couldn't help the slightly bitter laugh that escaped. "Worried enough to text but not to visit." He flinched. "Mom, I know you're angry with me. You have every right to be. But it's been really complicated at home." "Tell me," I said simply, settling into my recliner. James took a deep breath. "Amanda and I have been fighting constantly since your hospitalization. She thinks I'm obsessed with your health situation, and that I'm using it as an excuse to avoid dealing with our marriage problems. And what do you think?" "I think—" He hesitated, then continued more firmly. "I think I've been a terrible son. I think I've allowed Amanda to dictate who I can care about and when, and I think I've been too much of a coward to stand up to her." His honesty surprised me. "What's changed?" "Last week I found out Amanda's been hiding mail from you. Birthday cards get well cards. She intercepted them and threw them away before I could see them." His voice shook with anger. "When I confronted her, she said she was protecting our marriage from your manipulations." That's when I realized how twisted things had become. I remained silent, letting him continue. "I've also realized she's isolated me from everyone. I haven't seen my friends in months. I work and come home, work and come home. She monitors my phone, checks my location constantly. It's not normal, Mom. It's not healthy." "No," I agreed softly. "It's not. The social worker gave me some information before you were discharged, pamphlets about controlling relationships. I thought she was overstepping, but I kept them. I finally read them last night and—" He swallowed hard. It was like reading a description of my marriage. I reached out to take his hand, relieved when he didn't pull away. "What are you going to do, James?" "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I know I need to make changes, starting with being a better son to you." He squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom. For all of it. For not being there when you needed me, for letting Amanda's jealousy come between us, for being too weak to do what I knew was right." The apology was what I had been waiting for. But now that it had arrived, I realized it wasn't enough on its own. "James, I accept your apology, but I need more than words. I need to see changes in your behavior." He nodded, understanding. "That's fair. I want to rebuild your trust. Tell me how I can help now during the rest of your recovery." I considered his offer carefully. Part of me wanted to immediately welcome him back into my life without conditions, to pretend the abandonment had never happened. The mother in me wanted to protect him from the consequences of his actions. But the wiser part of me knew that true healing for both of us required honesty and boundaries. "I would appreciate a regular visit from you," I said. "Maybe Sunday afternoons we could have coffee catch-up. No pressure, just rebuilding our connection." "I can do that," he agreed readily. "What else?" "I need you to understand that I've had to create a new support network in your absence. Frank and Angela have become important to me. The volunteers from the senior program, too. If you come back into my life, you'll need to respect these new relationships." James looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. I'm glad you haven't been alone. And finally," I continued, my voice gentle but firm, "I need you to get help for yourself, James. Whether that means counseling for you individually, or finding a way to create healthier boundaries in your marriage. I can't be part of a dynamic where Amanda sees me as the enemy or where you're constantly torn between us." He was quiet for a long moment, absorbing my words. "That's the hardest part," he finally admitted. "I don't know if our marriage can survive if I stand up to her. She's threatened to leave before when I've tried to set boundaries." "That might be a risk you have to take," I said softly. "No healthy relationship is built on control and isolation." James stayed for nearly 2 hours that day. We talked more openly than we had in years about his marriage, about my recovery, about our relationship. When he left, he promised to return the following Sunday. I wanted to believe him, but protected my heart with cautious optimism rather than complete trust. To my pleasant surprise, he did return the next Sunday, and the one after that. Our conversations grew easier, less burdened by unspoken resentments. He shared that he had begun seeing a therapist privately using lunch breaks at work, so Amanda wouldn't know. "The therapist says I've been in a financially and emotionally abusive relationship," he told me during his 4th visit, the words clearly difficult for him to say. "She's helping me develop an exit plan in case I decide that's what I need to do." "Are you considering leaving Amanda?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. "I'm considering what a healthy life looks like," he replied thoughtfully. "Right now, my marriage doesn't fit that picture." As my physical recovery continued, so did the healing of my relationship with James. It was a gradual process, built on his consistent presence and demonstrated change rather than just promises. There were setbacks, times when he canceled our Sunday visits because of Amanda's demands, or when he seemed to regress into old patterns of appeasing her. But overall, I saw genuine effort from him to reconnect and to establish healthier boundaries in his marriage. 6 months after my surgery, life had settled into a new normal. My health had fully recovered, though I was left with the impressive scar that I wore as a badge of survival. The home health services had ended long ago, but many of the connections formed during that difficult time remained. Frank and Angela had become dear friends. We met weekly for dinner, sometimes at my apartment, sometimes at their homes. Frank's wife, Maria, taught me to make authentic enchiladas, and Angela's teenage daughters adopted me as an honorary grandmother, often stopping by to share school news or seek advice. The seniors I'd met through the companion program had introduced me to their community center, where I now volunteered 2 days a week, using my nursing background to lead health education workshops. For the first time since retirement, I felt truly useful again, part of a community that valued my experience and knowledge. And James had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. After months of therapy and increasingly tense confrontations with Amanda, he had finally taken the difficult step of separation. The process wasn't easy. Amanda had indeed controlled their finances to such an extent that James had limited access to their joint resources. But with the help of his therapist and a good lawyer, he had established his independence, moving into a modest apartment and rebuilding his life piece by piece. Our Sunday afternoon visits had become a cherished tradition for both of us. Sometimes we simply talked over coffee. Other times we worked on projects together or took walks in the nearby park. Slowly, the easy companionship we had once shared returned, though now, with a mature understanding of boundaries and responsibilities on both sides. One Sunday in early autumn, as leaves began to turn golden outside my apartment windows, James arrived with a particularly thoughtful expression. "Mom," he said, after settling on the couch with his coffee, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened after your surgery." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I still feel ashamed when I remember sending you that text telling you to call an Uber after major surgery." He shook his head, genuine remorse in his eyes. "I can't believe I became someone who would do that to his own mother." "People make mistakes, James," I said gently, "especially when they're under the influence of manipulative people. What matters is that you recognized it and changed. But if Frank and Angela hadn't stepped in, if the hospital staff hadn't arranged all that home care, you could have had serious complications. You could have died, Mom, because I wasn't there for you." The raw pain in his voice moved me. "But I didn't die. And in a strange way, what happened led to many positive changes for both of us. I found a wonderful new community of friends. You found the courage to leave an unhealthy relationship. He considered this. Still, I want you to know that I'll never let you down like that again. No matter what happens in my life going forward, new relationships, career changes, whatever comes, I will always be there when you need me. I believe you, I said, and realized I truly did. The son I had raised, the caring and responsible young man who had somehow lost his way, had found his moral compass again. As our conversation continued, James shared news of a promotion at work and his tentative first steps back into dating. I told him about a senior cruise I was considering with some friends from the community center. When it was time for him to leave, he hugged me tightly at the door. I love you, Mom. See you next Sunday. I love you too, James, I replied, watching him walk to his car with confident strides that had been absent for so long. Back inside, I found myself reflecting on the painful journey of the past 6 months. The betrayal by my son had been devastating, a wound far deeper than the surgical incision that had precipitated it all. But from that pain had come unexpected blessings, new friendships, a renewed sense of purpose, and ultimately, the restoration of my relationship with James on healthier terms. I had learned that family isn't just about blood ties. It's about who shows up when you're in need, whether that's your biological son or strangers like Frank and Angela, who become like family through their actions. I had learned the importance of setting boundaries, even with those we love most dearly. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that it's never too late to build a community of genuine support and connection. The crisis that began with a cold text message telling me to just call an Uber had ultimately led to one of the most profound periods of growth in my life. Sometimes it takes our darkest moments to lead us to unexpected light. Thank you so much for watching my story. I hope it might help someone else who's facing difficult family dynamics or feeling abandoned by those they love most. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to positive change in your life? How did you handle it? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the family we choose can be just as important as the family we're born into.